Author of Hidden History, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, and Survival of the Richest, Donald Jeffries separates the real from the unreal. Fact from fiction. Reverse engineering our manufactured reality. And now, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., this is I Protest with Donald Jeffries.
And welcome to I Protest. This is Donald Jeffries here with you, as we are here every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as the announcer says. I still hear that music. Hopefully you guys can hear me over that. It'll be fading out, I suppose. Very special show today. Very excited to have Meghan Walsh back. I think people remember her from a few months back. She was on the show. She's the daughter of America's Most Wanted, John Walsh. She has some very provocative things to say. Not only regarding him or her family, but also just a lot of the things that we discuss in the show. She's very politically awake. So, Meghan, thanks for coming back on the show. Love to have you.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, as always. I think we had a good time last time, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a little bit as of time has gone by, right? And so, of course, there's some updates. Not the best updates, but there is, we'll get into that a little bit. But I guess where I could start, for people that aren't familiar with who I am, right?
Yes, I was going to say, just start from the beginning, tell your story, and then we'll get to the updates.
For sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar with who I am, again, as Don said, my name is Meghan Walsh. I actually am the sister of Adam Walsh, who was the little boy with the baseball bat who went missing in 1981 out of the Sears department store in Hollywood, Florida. And then from that, my parents went on, and my father went on to become known. His name is John Walsh, of course, for America's Most Wanted. And then shows since then, like The Hunt with John Walsh, and his last was In Pursuit. And of course, prior to that, I digress for a moment. Prior to that was the founding of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which started out as the Adam Walsh Center, as my brother's namesake. So that's kind of the history there of who I am, my family history. I grew up on Capitol Hill, essentially, and within politics and media, as well as entertainment. I guess we could say behind the scenes, Don, right? So,
Sure.
Essentially behind the scenes, and maybe as a child there's conversations that they don't think that you pay attention to, or there's things that you notice growing up later, that you recollect, or begin to question. I think we've all in the past few years especially come to question some things in our lives or elsewhere that maybe we didn't before or didn't think we ever would, and I can say that for myself. But that's my family's background and history. In brief, myself, I have a background in fashion and music. I have degrees in graphic design and painting. I attended Parsons School of Design for Fashion in Manhattan. I lived in India for years, developing my own clothing line and setting up production and distribution. It was called Blank Silk by Meghan Walsh. From there, I went into music and wrote my own EP and co-produced it, where then I, kind of got into the scene with, I was doing, fashion shows, runway shows, and my music at the same time. I did LA Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week, all of the big stuff. Shows in Miami and whatnot. So I was up in that kind of a area, I guess, if you will, of the industry, versus where my father was, in television and media on CNN, that kind of a thing. So I did get a good little, taste of each of the areas, if you will, I decided to leave the industry on the birth of my second child, who was actually with the best friend of Kanye West. So I had seen enough in that and left, to basically focus on training and healing and being able to help others with trauma, as well as start developing a learning farm, a community family learning farm, and just teaching non-toxic living, providing space for the community, classes, as well as for, of course, after school programs for teenagers and things like that, which people that know my work know that that's what I'm a huge proponent of, and the work that I do that we can get into, or for those that listened last time, is really about, our community and how we support families and how we support children, so that, we don't have these government entities or businesses and organizations acting under the color of law that are taking our children and actually trafficking them. And so I guess when I say that, that segues into what I do now. So that was my past, so people have an idea. But, moving into the past, 5 or so years, I was developing the farm. As well as I started looking into, of course, child trafficking. I grew up as John Walsh's daughter. I thought that's what we did. We're all about justice. We're all about, what's right, protecting children, right? That's what I was born into. So I started looking into, and we all know, and also from the last time, especially when Epstein, there were things leading up to, when Epstein came out. I just say that because it's an easy place and more in the recent past for people. But there were instances leading up to that period of time where I did, question things. I was kind of the black sheep, if you will, and I wasn't into politics, and, I wasn't into the industry anymore, and I was back in church, and, these different variables that did lead separation, as well as seeing things behind the scenes, like I referenced before, within media. When I was in college, my best friend actually went missing, and her remains, I will say, were found later. It's a gruesome story. People can look into it. It was publicized. Her name was Lindsay Harris. It was out of Las Vegas. She was actually my best friend growing up in the Finger Lakes when we would every summer. I grew up, half the year in Florida, half the year upstate New York, where my father's actually from. So he is from Auburn, New York, which, for those that like the kind of history stuff in the background, Auburn is by Syracuse, New York. It is the lake that is there in Auburn is called Owasco Lake. It is one of the 5 Finger Lakes in upstate New York. And it's also the hometown of Joe Biden's first wife.
Before you go on about your best friend, that intrigues me. What? Tell us a little bit about that. Did you suspect anything at the time, or were you already kind of becoming suspicious of these things? And what did they conclude about her death? It sounds like a foul play.
Yes, absolutely. What we found on actually is could probably be an entire show in itself, to be quite honest with you. But this has to do with another area of corruption and human trafficking, of course, of women, and specifically out of Las Vegas, because it is, of course, the state that, it is legal. Prostitution is legal in Nevada and all of that. So this is quite an issue. But what we found is that her boyfriend, quote unquote, that's always what they go by, the boyfriend pimp. They start grooming the girl. He was out of the music industry as well. His name was Solomon Barron, and he actually groomed her and got her to move out to Las Vegas, and did the whole love bombing and the boyfriend. I think people would probably relate to it now with the Tate brothers, what they're being accused of, that kind of boyfriend pimping kind of thing. And she moved out there, and it ended up becoming an escort. When I saw her, a mug shot or so of hers, I didn't recognize her because of the, I could, but it was so drastic because of the plastic surgery, and just the high end escort look was definitely not my friend growing up. Very sweet girl, very smart. Her parents were teachers in Skaneateles, New York, which is where my parents have their summer homes, and we've grown up once we moved from Owasco Lake. So she was taken out there. She was escorted. They were living together. Everything was in her name. Of course, that's another tactic that they do. And all of a sudden, she goes missing. She would come home, and people would follow, go by the house when she was home, or she came home one time and didn't go to her parents' house because she had a broken nose, things like that. So this was already kind of, there were different instances to lead, that it would be related to Solomon. So long story short, Dawn, is that she goes missing. They decide, America's Most Wanted decides to do the case. They find out she's missing because Solomon calls her mother and says, I came back to Syracuse from Las Vegas, and Lindsay was supposed to be moving our stuff, and I just haven't heard from her. And Lindsay was very close with her parents. She would always call, she didn't call her mother that Mother's Day. And that was a big deal. And we all know that. So it seems like a great alibi that all of a sudden he had to fly back to Syracuse, and, he just doesn't know now. But instead, I watched my dad, much to my dismay and her parents' dismay, obviously in conjunction with America's Most Wanted at the time, create this narrative about an escort hooker that had been out in Las Vegas, the John Walsh tone. And it was, this, we don't know what's happened to her. And they ended up finding, it's graphic for those that are maybe weak stomached, but they did end up finding her legs separately, but close by in Illinois, actually it was. And there were some kids ATVing on the side of the highway. And I guess some animals were dragging her remains out. So my stories aren't very fun between my brother and these, but that's the nature of you're guys. Yeah.
Well, now does I'm assuming, because this was your good friend, that your dad must have known her personally. Didn't he feel a personal stake in this? So, but he still went with some kind of fake narrative, sounds like.
He very much knew who she was, and I actually was home at the cottage in Skaneateles one of the times when her parents actually showed up at the door, Dawn, and they came in, grieving parents, again, very sweet. Her father painted these beautiful landscape paintings. I'm a landscape painter. He was such an inspiration to me. More parents, to me than even, and warm, than even my parents at times. So they come in and we're trying to discuss this, and I did have to raise my voice and say, what are you doing here, Dad? This is not who Lindsay is. We know who is most likely, who did this to her, who would know about this. And I was only in my 20s, mind you, so I wasn't really eloquent. And I've believed my entire life about, just like everyone else, in my father. And, I do want to preface that I honor him, or take the time to say here that, I honor my parents. I honor the good from the work that has been done. But again, it's not black and white, and things need to be questioned. And especially when, we're all trusting these people with our children, with our tax money, with, so on and so forth variables. So, but Lindsay, basically they ended up moving forward with America's Most Wanted. I believe between his shows, even beyond America's Most Wanted, up even into In Pursuit with John Walsh, where my brother Callahan was the co-host. They were profiling her case about, I believe it was between 7 or 8 times that they did her case. And over the course of that, what ended up coming about, or what they went with, was people can look this up as well, as a gentleman by the name of Neil Falls was allegedly, going to an escort's apartment. He, arranged a meeting with an escort at her apartment. He went in and he started to assault her, and she shot him. And when they went into her apartment and they looked through his things in his pocket, he had a list, and on that list it had the name Lindsay in the list. And when they went out to his car, he had a quote unquote Don serial killer kit. I'm not sure what that exactly entails by definition, but that's what that was. That's what we're going with. Okay. And then, so then we see, my point here, Don, is that then we see the emergence of the serial killer, issue or narrative.
Serial killers and hookers, that's they always go after them for some reason. What was this? And this obviously was, you had this was emotional with you because it was your friend. But is this what triggered, you think? Because you said you went, you thought your dad was doing great work. He's your dad. You're honoring him, and there were a lot of good came out of that. I mean, you're certainly missing children now. You have the Amber Alerts and all that stuff. It pretty much came out, I think, of what he originally started doing. But do you think this is what started you down the road to where you're on a show like mine? I mean, Conspiracy Central here. I mean, did this make you? I mean, so you have to say, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Don. Go ahead.
So I mean, after this, you had a lot of questions. You see, there was a guy in the music industry that kind of steered direction away from there. So you're in your 20s, and you're starting to have doubts. And this was the first thing that triggered you, right? Explain, because I think people would like to know, like, from that point on or whatever, what led you to because eventually we're going to get to with your children, the situation with that and everything. Yeah. How did all this come about? This was the first time you're saying you're basically questioning your dad about it. And what happened after that?
Well, and you have to understand, Don, that in these arenas, if you will, and especially with John Walsh, when you question things or when you don't agree necessarily, you are very gaslit, you're very bullied, oh, that's crazy, that's the go-to, and all of that to deflect, right? So obviously, when Lindsay's case happened, I had my, issues with it, but I was in college, Don, and then I went on to fashion and music, and I grieved my friend, and I kept in touch with her family. But it did bother me again when it comes up. You asked how I got here with all these conspiracies and all of this, in this arena, right? Is that, of course, when Epstein came about, I guess I could skip forward to that. And then, especially then, that's when they profiled her case again on In Pursuit with John Walsh. And I was like, you've said it's a serial killer. You said it's this and that. You've profiled her case when you didn't have new leads. And that really upset me because that re-traumatized her family, and that was for ratings. And it seemed to be more so for that. When again, we knew who most likely did it. And what we found in that was it did get deeper, Don, and you brought up Amber Alerts and things like that. So what happened there is we looked deeper into it, and Solomon Barron, the boyfriend pimp, and I had been approached over the years by another girl that was in the house with her that gave me a firsthand account of the guerrilla pimping, if you will, the very brutal and, mean-spirited pimping. I won't go into that, but that Solomon was doing. And if people look into this, there was a case a couple years ago with a rapper. We brought up the industry, right? A rapper by the name of Molly Mall, and he's out of Las Vegas, and he was busted for this guerrilla pimping, and he is serving time. I believe he gets out, or recently got out, or is getting out in the near future. And what they did there is they charged him, as well as then they charged a gentleman by the name of Ocean Fleming. And Ocean Fleming, they put all of what we found, they essentially put all of Solomon Barron, who again is the boyfriend pimp, all of what would be his charges and his crimes. So for guerrilla pimping, for different things associated to that, they actually accused this Ocean Fleming gentleman of. Now, Ocean Fleming was working for Molly Mall Molly Mall was also on these Love and Hip Hop franchises and different things on television. Okay. So Ocean Fleming used to actually work with Molly Mall. And what it was is that people can look it up. I can provide more names and information if they would like. But there basically they were tied to a Pimps and Police program that the Las Vegas Metro Police have running. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that police departments do prostitute women, and they do, run drugs, and they do these things. I mean, that's the corruption part of it, right? That's what that entails when there's corruption. So this is not anything too controversial, guys. It's pretty based, but we did find out that that's, what was going on. And specifically, people can look into it, but the Las Vegas, her name is leaving me right now. I apologize, but there are basically judges. There are judges and their daughters, or daughters of police, that two of them have been murdered since coming out about it, and others have gotten in trouble, arrested. The chief of police of the Las Vegas Metro Police's daughter was arrested for procuring. They were doing this out of clothing stores, so little clothing stores in the Las Vegas metro area. They were, I forget the names at the time. I didn't really know we were going to go into this today, but it's coming up. So they basically the police were going over, their children were hanging out, the daughters were hanging out at these clothing stores. In the back of the clothing stores, they were like these, hip, youth clothing stores. In the back, they would be smoking. They'd be having these young guys were actually pimping out the younger girls who were their daughters, some of them. And Ocean Fleming would be paying, he would be the guy there that was paying off the police officers. So they'd come by, check, pick up their cash, check on their daughter or whatever, whoever they know that's involved, or the situation in general. I think some of them were clients at times. And so this operation was going on. I know that Lindsay was probably around that kind of a thing. We've had people come out that were, involved and have been retaliated against, even escorts that were within it that came out. And that would lead also into what, we're currently dealing with talking about my children and getting to that point, in terms of we've seen in these types of situations, especially that CPS, Child Protective Services, and DCF and other areas, it goes by other names in other states, which should be concerning in itself. But Child Protective Services, we've seen, is really being used to retaliate and to threaten people, and it's very, very bad, and that leads to my current situation. But to digress for one moment, to thoroughly answer you, on how did I end up in this arena? It was not only this case; it was things like Amber Alert. I started looking into my brother Adam's case, after that, and probably in my early 30s, I started looking into my brother Adam's case, and all of his documents, police records, and files are available for free. I encourage everyone here to go check them out. It's on justiceforadam.com. Again, that's justiceforadam.com. It's endless documents, but I think, when you click on them, each one is kind of jaw-dropping, for lack of a better term. I think once people look back after 42 years, a lot of people will start to notice what we've realized, this narrative versus the actual truth, especially through media and government, agendas, if you will. Federalized policing, predictive programming. We could go into the CIA and the Finders cult. That's this is a huge...
This is what I remember was so great about you, because all this stuff. I just want to say real quick to the Rockfin chat, I'm actually able to see you today. It's the first time in a while, so if you have anything you want to say over there in Rockfin, I'll be monitoring that as well. And I think, let me make sure. Yes, right now we are live on freeworld.fm. So let me know. I don't know. I can't access the chat there, but let me know if you're hearing it. So we're live streaming several places. My Twitter still doesn't seem to be working. I don't know why we set it up, but it doesn't go there. but obviously on YouTube here. So I didn't mean to. I just want to make sure everybody knows that that I'm seeing them. But you're fascinating. You know all this stuff. So I'm just trying to figure out the timeline here. Your friend has this awful thing happen to her that opens your eyes a little bit. And maybe you're a fan of America's Most Wanted. You're interested. Obviously, your dad seems like he's doing great work. He's trying to help find missing kids. What could be, solve, unsolved cases. I mean, that's something God's work. But you're starting to see, okay, maybe there's something a little shady here. He didn't go after the music guy in Las Vegas. And so, at what point do you start having a conflict to your parents? Because I don't want to go ahead, but people know before what happened to your kids, and you're ostracized from your parents, and I think they were instrumental in taking your kids. How did it get to that point? When did you have like the first really showdown with your dad, and did he just call you crazy or one of those nutty conspiracy theorists or something? How did this timeline progress here?
Yeah. So, and I have to point out that, we go on about he's done all this great stuff, and we know the premise around my father. Right. And so when you're in a family like that, especially, you're almost, it's like a silent bullying if you were to ever question anything, right? You're the bad guy. How dare you ever question anything? So there is that precedent already set. And, maybe I didn't get that precedent as soon as I should have, or didn't understand that. I will admit humbly. Okay. I thought again that I was doing what our family did. I thought we were looking into stuff. I thought, different stuff like that. But, also it's my family, and we go through the years because you want to know leading up and when this happened through the years. We also know, unfortunately, that my father has, come out about having a sex addiction. We know my parents had a 10-year divorce proceeding. I grew up answering the phone to mistresses while I'm putting my baby brother down for a nap. There is a whole side again that I kept with grace for years. And, every family has their crap, and especially when you've been through trauma. So I absolutely am, very understanding of that. But nonetheless, you're a child in it. And, especially living in the shadow of Adam Walsh, and you might be, the public might see a different perception, silver spoon, or you have all of this and that. And I think that it is important to really think about the children of celebrities or politicians or different things, because you don't really know what they're going through, to be honest. And in a lot of cases, it's very much, I hate to say it, but you're like an accessory for them, and especially for people in my parents' position. So they had a child go missing. We end up finding, my mother was with him at the time. We found out, that would get into my brother's case, but we found out many other things about what was really going on in the house and really going on at that time, including, drug use and a love affair with a significantly younger live-in lover at the house, who had recently moved out, and things that if we had looked at this case, now, especially knowing what we know about, most likely it happens, to some, by a family member or someone close to the family. We know these statistics that I could go on and on about from the work that I do now. But, looking now at the case, it's very alarming, and it really should be reopened and reinvestigated, I personally feel. So I was looking into these things. I know my family. I know the behind the closed doors. I know the talk, between people on a stage at a press conference that, the audience and the masses will never see or know, different things like that. And when Epstein came out, I had been, becoming a mother myself, really makes you look back at your childhood, right, and your upbringing, and I also am in the field of, again, trauma healing and different things of that nature. So I really you start having realizations about your own upbringing. You start questioning things. And when your parents are still coercively controlling you and you don't realize that, and then you start to have more outside experiences than, inside, for lack of a better term, within the family experiences, we know how we grow, right? And we start to realize things. So I was speaking up within my family, about the abuse that was still going on. They were starting to do things to my children that I wasn't okay with. And for me, absolutely did not want to live the lifestyle that I grew up with. I did not want my children to have that lifestyle. I will be honest. I wanted my children to grow up on a farm and go to school locally in a small town and, be involved in the community. And that's what we were when they were taken. But what led up to them being taken was me questioning Adam's case, speaking up within my family about, the abuse, and that I was going to have to, move outside of the town and move on with my life to, say Miami or somewhere that I did have connections and support for work to take care of my children if they weren't going to be able to, get help for themselves. Don, I was actually asking them to go get help. They're older. I feel that even deservedly, they should do that for all the trauma. They got thrust into the spotlight right after Adam, and which is an interesting
Oh yeah, I want to talk about Adam's case
in itself. Yeah.
Well,
we can go back to that. But to answer your question, it was when Epstein, it's really complicated, I guess is why it's so long-winded. But I was talking about those things. And then when Epstein comes out, I said, like, it was Dad. One day I said, Dad, was it like Cindy McCain where, she says, oh, everyone knew about it, but what were we going to do about it? And when I asked that, he kind of got squirrely and said, yeah, Meghan, as he's walking away, what were we going to do about it? And, I have to admit internally, I said, well, that's not the right answer. And so then I started digging, I guess, when you're a born detective.
Before you get that, explain the Cindy McCain. This is Cindy McCain. All I know about her is she stole a bunch of prescription drugs and got away with it. I know that. What was the reference, the comparison to Cindy McCain there? I might have missed that.
Well, so Cindy McCain was interviewed about and was asked a question about Epstein and asked, there's a famous clip that, she was asked, did you know about it? And her response was, well, everyone knew about it, but what were we going to do about it?
Okay, so I didn't realize she had done that. Well, and we told you before, we'll talk more about Adam's, but do you see the question on the screen there? Can you see the screen?
Yes. Has the guest ever read the work of the late Dave McGowan? He covered Adam's murder. So I am familiar with Dave McGowan, and a lot of people have written about Adam and different, there's a lot of different theories. That's why this is ironic that I'd be, poised in this position because my brother's case has been controversial since the day it happened, Don. So yes, I am familiar with his work. He did wonderful work about Adam. To be honest, I'm a very authentic and to the fact person. So there's so many different works. I'd have to refresh my memory on his specific take on it. But yes, I do appreciate his work and suggest that people actually go over and look at it. So thank you for that comment.
Oh, yeah, he's great. And, I think I told you the last time in terms of Adam that I was amazed that you're so open-minded about this because most families won't discuss these things. And this makes you really unique. And I'm sure I don't know if I asked you this last time, but because a lot of the questions you have about it's just as an outsider looking at it, I had those same questions. How could he have disappeared in the store? And a lot of people have said, they question the photo of him and, did this really happen? And you kind of alluded to that as well. So you get all those kind of people, but it's Rhonda Tate says she saw the Daniel J. Travanti TV movie Adam. What was that?
Yeah,
I'm guessing that was a lot of fiction in it, or was that very reality based?
Well, I'll tell you, the facts of it was that it was said to be a family approved script. It was, and I will also point out that there is a scene actually in that movie where my mother is at home after Adam has been kidnapped and the phone rings and she picks up the phone and there's a woman on the other end and she says, hi, I'm horribly paraphrasing, forgive me, but it's something along the lines of, hi, we're Adam's new family. We wanted to let you know that he is doing well, something about he has an ATV or some kind of, mobile or some bike or, something like that he rides. and she starts, yelling on the phone, my mother in the movie, and says, "No, that's impossible. He's dead," and hangs up the phone. And no one really paid attention to that scene, which I found very interesting, as well as I'll skip for a second to Joe Matthews' book, and who was the detective that says that he, came to the conclusion that Otis Toole was Adam's murderer to close the case. In the beginning of his book, Bringing Adam Home, it does state in the foreword, first and foremost, that this is a work of fiction. So there's these little details that are very interesting. And then when you put it all together, it kind of shows a bigger picture of questioning. But yeah, I mean, it's been controversial, since the day it happened. We've been told at different times, including up until recently, even last year, that Otis Toole, Henry Lee Lucas, and even Jeffrey Dahmer, three of the nation's most notorious serial killers. Again, we have these themes, were all, in that block right at that location, even possibly, to take this random little boy at 6 years old, Adam Walsh, who just got left in the store, put out by a security guard. And, so it is, it's a wild narrative when you actually look at the facts.
Yeah, I know it is, and I might have gotten you sidetracked there, but because we're getting into Epstein, and I find that Jeffrey Epstein is obviously that just happened. You're talking about you became interested in Epstein before he hung himself in prison, or this before? So did you mention anything to your father or your parents about Epstein? I mean, were kind of outside of his area, I guess, but I'm wondering what his reaction was to you talking about that.
Well, so that's a great guide back, because we were discussing Cindy McCain, right? And Epstein, this whole issue. So when Epstein came out, obviously it was big. Everyone was looking at it. All these names were being dropped, all these allegations. And so I went to my father, and, because I'm thinking to myself, wow, well, we're in this, arena of many of these people, if not my dad knowing or having some sort of, connection or here and there with these people. So I was, again, going to my dad, like thinking I was going to get the inside scoop, to be honest, you guys, not ever thinking that I would be retaliated and worse from then on out. But I went to him and I said, was it like Cindy McCain said, did you know about this stuff, or what's the scoop, Dad? Like, what was the talk amongst you guys, what is she talking about, and this is like in our family room, literally, that kind of a thing. And then again, I got this, deflection and this kind of gaslighting and walking away very abruptly. That was like, yeah, Meghan, I mean, what were we going to do about it? And from there, that's when I started questioning things. I had already been looking into my brother's case, and, we had this national thing come out, especially I'll say it with Trump, of child trafficking, right? And it was this direction towards this Epstein and, this global elite and things that we were never going to be able to actually figure out or do anything about, as at the end of the day. I mean, we have to be real, and we still haven't seen most of it to this day. And now he's, unalived himself or whatever, allegedly. So that's where we're at from there. But, I was looking at that, and I was also getting into, obviously, the child trafficking. And when I started looking at it being directed towards these figures and this kind of a notion that was bigger than us, I started researching. I guess it's a gift that I have, but it's also become a curse. And I started digging, and I looked at the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, and I started asking questions to myself, because I had also, prior to that, just like the Lindsay incidents, Don, I had actually been, giving the National Center through my parents and via email, things like my take on the Cuties movie, right? And I also, excuse me, I was getting a call. The Cuties movie, and also things like kidchat.net. So these online platforms, right, that, the predators are on, and, this whole thing that we actually, could do a show on as well. What are these narratives of, the dangers to children that then lead to things like Amber Alert or, these different, what to us look like efforts of protection, but at the end of the day, really equate to not having much of an effect for the actual, communities and finding children, but do collect a lot of data, which is a lot of, is a very lucrative business these days. It lends itself to a lot of control of society, and we know towards police state and different things like that. So that was in my parameter. Okay. While we're, obviously that's my background. I was having difficulty with my dad when he came out with facial recognition, and, they're saying, oh, this is for terrorists and kidnappers. And I'm like, no, Dad, this is Big Brother. Like, what are you doing? Please stop. Or can we talk about this? These things were trickling around. It's not so direct because people have to understand, like, it was trickling around. Okay. And these were leading up over a couple of years. So when I started realizing that who are the people, they tell us people, predators, child predators, they try, the best ones try to get the closest to children. We're realizing nowadays it's a lot of the work that I do who our modern child predators are, unfortunately, being, teachers, foster parents, law enforcement, politicians, administration, things of that nature. We're finding now more so. And so I started realizing that, the child trafficking issue is not some stranger danger issue. It's not some elite globalist issue. It is ultimately, we'll get to that, but, that's not what's in our faces here. And we need to really be asking ourselves, what does American child trafficking look like? We're in the land of the free, influencers, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, everyone's perfect. No one has crap, all this kind of stuff. We know well what international and global child trafficking looks like. We've seen the border now. We know what Bangkok, trafficking looks like. I could tell you India, Indian child trafficking looks like.
Thailand, Ukraine, there's a lot. Yeah,
exactly. And we've been very exposed to that. And I think for a reason, Don, here in America, because if we're focused on that, and that's a very different visual and presentation and method of the trafficking than what is actually happening right here in America to our children and families. It has a nice, pretty bow and package on it. The public has been given, all these children without loving homes, and these horrible parents, and we're here to protect the children. This entire grift. The entire grift. So we've even given the public the answers. Oh, they must have done something. There's more to the story. All these lines that we've been programmed to say.
I don't know if you've how much you listen to my show, but I've had several people on over the last year that had dealings with Child Protective Services. You can relate to that. That took their kids or tried to take their kids, and over the most ridiculous reasons. A neighbor thinks one of them's undernourished, or they didn't get them vaccinated. That kind of crap.
Well, we're finding, and yes, Pizzagate is a major distraction. It's not to say that some parts of it isn't true with Podesta and the real names, but the level and the blown out proportion.
Yeah, he had a follow up there. Was that what's your take? Is Pizzagate? There are tunnels under that, and they in fact they're all over Washington D.C. But those photographs were very strange. You saw the little girl 3 or 4 years old duct taped to a table, and
it isn't that crazy. When I heard tunnels and stuff, I was like, you guys, I've been in tunnels under the White House. I have pictures of under the White House. Like, this is not this extravagant, blown out of proportion, unrealistic thing. So the media did a very good job about that. Lately, they've been doing a very good job of bringing back this like satanic panic, if you will, which is interesting because it's what we saw happen around the time of Adam's taking. That was also, Eton Patz was right before Adam, and then we have Johnny Gosh, and we had these boys that were being taken, and it was subsequently after we find out in 87 when the finders are arrested in Jacksonville with the 6 children. So in that they had, and we're going a little off, but it all ties in. This is what we have to be looking at, the history. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's looking at history and looking at things before what you were told, or what is the background there.
I just want to share. Rhonda Tate has asked a couple times about your children. We'll get to. I'm not ignoring your question, Rhonda. We'll get to that when she gets later. How things are now. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So so Pizzagate and all of that kind of stuff is a distraction. I know we were talking about some other stuff, but Adam's case, it leads into that. I just mentioned the finders called. So we have Adam, we have these little boys going missing. That was, we have, excuse me, I'm drawing a blank for a second, but we have the Franklin scandal, we have the McMartin school, we have everything going around there. Larry King with North Fox Island. Who is still alive and out walking. We've done exposures in the last week on my Twitter page. People can find me on Twitter at Meghan Walsh _.
They threw the little girl, Alicia Owen. How long did she serve in prison? They threw one of the little girls who they charged her with perjury. And I don't know how many years she served in prison, but you're right. Larry
Bonacci. Bonacci. Bless his heart. He tried to come forward, Johnny Gosh and all that kind of stuff was a wild thing. But so we have all of these things going on. But then we've got these like ugly faces for the media, if you will, and that's something that Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas actually pointed out and was a big alarm for me when I decided to be looking at Adam's case. I said, you know what, I'm going to start from the beginning, unbiased. I want to look at Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole without the Adam Walsh narrative. They had a history of we've had The Confession Killer on Netflix come out since, then that was recently, but what are these people aside from it? And then we find, that Otis Toole most likely confessed to Adam's murder because he was following and seeing the perks that Henry Lee Lucas was getting in Texas. And he kept saying, I just want to be in Texas with Henry. And, and he was seeing the fame that Henry was getting. So when Otis confessed, he was very adamant about an author coming in, to take his confession and a book deal and, all of this, what did they call it? Milkshakes and fried chicken, right? Is what Henry Lee Lucas used to say. So based on the perks for admitting and confessing to crimes that you didn't do. So we see that in their past and their track record. Then we see Otis Toole recanting and confessing and different things around Adam. We have a decapitated head that hasn't been, thoroughly evaluated, appropriately. Just the different things that have happened. I started looking at the records and it wasn't adding up. So I think that those two things were going hand in hand. My work within, looking at child trafficking, what that really is, and realizing that it was our domestic child trafficking system. I started advocating and speaking out in my community and nationally. And I was holding bridge walks, awareness events. My children were coming with me to them, and they were beautiful events with the community. It wasn't, Epstein, whatever it was, CPS's trafficking our children. Our children are not for sale. And really what got me there was when I started looking into Epstein and finding so many families, these events that they were having in the Midwest and especially Arizona. It's a huge, one of the biggest states for domestic child trafficking. There's a huge issue there. And there were tons of families that were holding these events, Don, that were holding up signs saying, return our children to their loving homes. And so I started seeing these groups and these cases where they were loving homes. They were, great families, even with extended families, and their children had, under false allegations and false reports, been taken and never to be seen again. And so I started looking more and more into that. And I started getting information, obviously, in my community, about our local situations and foster homes, one of which is Hibiscus House. Where my mother was actually used as the face to fundraise to get the project done, which is not, to this day, is not anything that it proposed to be. It was supposed to be a village for children, all this beautiful stuff. And it's basically a shelter again, which it was originally saying it was the response to, right? The cure for, so the children weren't in it. And that is owned by Children's Home Society, which is who is responsible for taking my children and kidnapping and trafficking them for the past 2.5 years.
Well, start on that, how that happened, because so you lost your children. You first lost them 2.5 years ago. Do you think your father was that they were instrumental? Your family was instrumental in having them taken, right?
Well, they Yes, absolutely, Don. They conspired, I guess, if you will, the entire event. It was an ambush event. It's been, organized terrorism ever since, methodically, destruction of your reputation, the playbook of, mental illness, drug abuse, abuser, criminal, they do the whole gambit. And at this point, I think we all realize that that's a defamation and an attempt to hide their lies. Still, many people do that. It's part of coercive control and narcissistic abuse and everything that goes along with that. And so, yes, they did. They have, it's a very small town. My father campaigned for the sheriff to get into office. He's a younger guy, my age, actually. And he put him in place. And then the following year, they started an ambush. And on April 1st, April Fool's Day, they started with an unmarked police pullover of me and my children out by our farm where no one could see, serving me with paperwork with insane allegations in them. Nothing was done for 14 days. CPS didn't show up or do anything then. But 14 days later, I'm ambushed at my home. My father's on a Zoom taken to custody hearing, emergency, everything. And this is the John Walsh way. We rush in, everything's over the top. Everyone's, the worst that you can possibly think of is happening here, tonight on America's Most Wanted.
Yes.
And my dad's not young either, Don. There's something going on there. We found the AARP article of his deep brain stimulation procedure through the Mayo Clinic, which was his buddy Hank Asher is the big donor at the Mayo Clinic, who people should know because he's the father of data and everything that we're dealing with now with national securities and surveillance of the American people and targeting of the American people. He was the founder of LexisNexis search engine as well as the Matrix. And he was actually with my father in Haiti during the time of Laura Silsby and Amber Alert in Port-au-Prince, as well as known
the Clinton Foundation is tied to that too, right? So strange going on. There's some strange stuff in Haiti. Yes.
Well, that's all, again, connected to Polaris and Palantir and, data collection, globally moving children around, saying that they're orphans, just like our CPS says. So do we see a theme here, Don? These poor children, but then the people were like, no, they have families. Their parents are looking for them. You're kidnapping 33 children out of Haiti. That's what this is, no matter what humanitarian effort you try to hide this under, currently a lot's coming out about Tim Ballard and Our Rescue and the Sound of Freedom movie. And I picked that apart. I was the bad guy. I actually went to Turning Point myself on my birthday in last July and went up to Tim myself while he was there. We have it on TikTok and on my Twitter page, but asking him, of course, thanking him to be graceful and polite, despite what I knew about him at the time, but that's not my job here. My job is to get the message out. So I bit my tongue, Don, with grace, and I approached Tim and Dan Bongino and different things and asked them, if they were aware of the domestic, I thanked them for their work, but I said, are you aware of the, domestic child trafficking issue in our country via CPS and family courts? And, I asked that you please, focus on that for the American people. And the reactions were very interesting, but that's again, another show.
Well, Dan Bongino was involved with it. He's involved with Ballard and the rescue efforts.
Well, it's the Patriot Mood. Turning Point was a big media event, down in Palm Beach. And I go to, I went to Mamas for DeSantis to go scope it out. When I speak out against, Ron DeSantis is actually the one who is turning a blind eye to the crimes of John Walsh currently in Florida, as well as massive crimes of DCF, of the Department of Florida, Children and Families within Florida is absolutely rampant. There's cases and lawsuits coming out all over the place. Parents are speaking up and it's all being ignored while he thinks that he's going to then be able to handle issues for a nation, when he can't even figure it out for his own state. So I digress. But, I go to these events. Don, I was literally born into these arenas and, came out by the grace of God. I can look back now and see so many ways that he's protected me, I have to say, throughout my life. And, where I'm at now is looking these evils in the face. And because I came out with all this different information, they did retaliate and take my children, my life.
Well,
and they
so many of
used
these people
CPS.
must, and they certainly did the same CPS they used on so many people. But what?
Well, we've had other cases come out, Don. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say because you were in the middle of this, and John Walsh's daughter, a lot of these people might have known you as a kid, I guess, or as a young lady, and then suddenly they see you as this kind of crusader, and they probably think you're nuts. Like, they think all of us are crazy. They're talking about this stuff, but I'm guessing that's the reaction you get. And I wanted to ask you too, before I forget, what's your family situation now in terms of is your father married again? Where is your mother married? And how many siblings do you have? And does anybody in your family, nephews, nieces, does anybody support you at all in what you're doing?
Thank you. My parents did actually have a 10-year divorce proceeding where my mother again filed restraining orders like his ex-mistresses. And suddenly one day, Don, they reconciled. So after 10 years of divorce proceedings, we were told when I was in college that they were reconciling. There's controversy around why that might be in itself, but they suddenly reconciled. I will say that, we begged my parents to divorce, I think, our entire upbringing, to be honest. We just wanted them happy because they have, in the same house, they have lived two different, lives, basically. And people even that worked at the center have made comments, that they're never in the center at the same time unless it's for an event. I don't think people really realize sometimes what a celebrity, quote unquote, couple is. My parents obviously met when my dad was 22 and my mom was 16, but a lot of these modern day celebrity couples are, somewhat arranged through your PR or through your agency or different ways like that. So, especially needing to be the all-American, family, face of the National Center, America's Most Wanted, they've lived a life, and it's not to say that they don't love each other. They have a very interesting love for one another. It's not one that I would choose, but it's interesting. And so, yes, they're still married to this day. I have two younger brothers. One is about 2 years younger than I, and the other is 12 years younger than I am. And they, my children, three of my children are living with my parents. My oldest daughter does go back and forth to the sudden biological father that came out of nowhere. My father paid for his attorney to file these false allegations and affidavits and start this case, which is actually interesting because my father also paid for James Campbell's attorney, my mother's live-in lover, right, when he was the main suspect in Adam's disappearance. My father shows up and is paying for his attorney randomly. So then, my two sons have been rush adopted to my parents so that they can complete their adoption maladministration or fraud. And then my oldest went to the biological father. People forget that she has an inheritance, so they are very open to taking her in after 9 years of not one phone call. Don, he could have called me at any time. I've honored this man her entire life. I said she had a biological father. We could reach out to him. I made it very normal for my children. And then I had a baby last year, about almost 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. And that video actually horrifically went viral. They came in a John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, made for TV effort and essentially a false flag. They created an entire scene in front of the woman's house that I was living at while I was pregnant. My entire pregnancy, they threatened me. They threatened to jail me. They gagged me for a year and a half, threatening jail on me. And they took my newborn baby at 5 days old with police and And the main, the sheriff's main right-hand guy, Michael Dilks, the sheriff is Eric Flowers in Indian River County. And they have a history of 40 years with the prior sheriff, Darrell Lore, trafficking drugs and women through our county. And that was something they didn't like me speaking out about, but everyone knows about. Again, I'm not this brilliant to be making up all this stuff, Don, so so that was part of it. But yes, so they took my youngest baby and Esther, and they placed her. My parents did not want her, and she's half African American. By the way, 2 of my children are half African American. One's half Indian, and my oldest is Caucasian. But they took her, and my parents did not want her, so she was placed in a very seedy part of town, south of our town, in a foster home, and she was there for a year. I did everything on the case plan, and people that know about the corruption with CPS, I wouldn't even have to say much more, but I did the entire case plan. I did every evaluation. I did them over and over again. I drug tested twice a week for 2 years at random. I was literally trafficked and worn out for 2.5 years while you're trying to get your children back. And it's that would again be, we did that on the first show, and we could go into in another show sometime, but the horrors of what people are put through in the system is just, it is crimes against children and humanity. So we have endured that. My children have spoken up. They have tried to say, this is lies. This is not right. They've reported abuse themselves by my parents, and it's been ignored. And then about 2, well, let's see, time flies, Don, especially in trauma, but I guess in August or September, we had a trial for my baby Esther. We had everything. We had completed the case plan. They had hindered it. They moved the goalpost. They hinder you. They don't answer. And then they go, oops, your time's up. You didn't finish. So we get to take your baby. But I had finished everything. And in my trial, suddenly the foster mother, who I had a wonderful relationship with, I have evidence of her not agreeing with any of this the entire time. Suddenly she's not testifying, and they have a surprise witness, Don, and it's John Walsh. So he walks in with all of his sheriffs around him through the back door or whatnot. And they say, oh, my lawyer says, Your Honor, this is trial by ambush. What does John Walsh have to do with this? This is insane. And at this point, why isn't John Walsh saying, look, my daughter has done everything that, the state has asked her to do. Why aren't you returning my grandchild? Instead, he shows up in a side conference room, backdoor deal, that I have to sit and witness him standing at the front of this conference table with the state prosecutors. I mean, it was literally like a military tribunal I've experienced for 2.5 years. It's me against all these black suits and the state and everybody. And we even know National Center, FBI are behind, what's going on here from my dad's own admissions, and what we found. And I literally watched my father completely lie, say my daughter is this and that. This baby is much better off in this foster home with this mother that she's been with for, a year. And I watched him essentially sell a baby in a backdoor deal, and that baby was mine, Don. And
well, that must have been such a gut-wrenching feeling to see your own father show up in court and testify against you. That's I can't imagine what that must be like.
I left the room, to be honest. I want to keep my grace, and this is very disgusting and foul. So I did leave the courtroom for his testimony, to be honest, Don. And when he was saying that in the conference room, I wasn't allowed to say anything. The state attorneys are laughing as they're walking out of the room, and my dad's saying these things to me. And I stood up, Don, and I looked at my dad like I have from the beginning. I said, you need to do the right thing. I said, this is our family. And they push, all the police come towards me, and, I'm the bad guy. I just stood up, Don, with my hands up, and I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving, and I walked out of the room, and I looked at all of them, all the deputies, they're staying in the hallway because they love to put the police presence in the courthouse. They had me falsely arrested in the beginning, so I'd be terrified for the rest of it. And I just looked at all of them, and their faces and said, this is my family. You all are failing even John Walsh by doing this. You've ripped our family apart. And now my daughter's going to grow up in a foster home where they're stacking up kids in our, local ghetto.
Sure.
It's, you have to excuse me, but it's
Yeah.
very, very bad. So
I can't imagine what that's like. There's another Chris Graves who's always full of questions. He said, do you feel, I don't know about this. He said, do you feel like the man who contacted for claiming to be Adam was real? What's the story behind that? Somebody contacted you and said they were Adam?
Yeah, actually. And thanks, Chris. Yeah, you are doing a great job. You got a buddy on that one. He's helping the show. No.
Oh, he's one of my main researchers. He's helped me out a lot. He's
great.
He's really incredible what he does. Definitely. He knows about all this stuff.
That's wonderful. Well, we are looking for people to help kind of streamline it. And at the end of the show, I'll let you know I do have a new podcast called Reexamined with Meghan Walsh, and it is going over all the Adam Walsh case files, and we'll go into other cases eventually. So yeah, the question was about actually right after my children were taken, it's very ironic. So either it could be that they sent someone in to support their, she's mentally ill narrative, or it genuinely is him. Right. So, I get a call. It was actually a message that I received about 2 days prior, and I listened to it, and it says, "Hey sis, it's Adam. I'm coming home after a long time. I arrive in Hollywood tomorrow morning. I'll see you soon. Don." That wow. I'm sitting in my room listening to, I never even listened to my messages, to be honest. So, yeah. And so I get that. And I think this is insane. I'm like, I must be hearing this wrong. Did he really say Adam? I listened to it about probably 20 more times, because I think there's too much wax in my ears or something. And, and then I end up actually, they send me a picture. They text me a picture, and it's a hospital bracelet, and it says Adam J. Walsh. It has November 14th, 1974 listed on it. And again, the detective in me, or the John Wall, they forget who I am. They forget who they raised on. I think that's where they went wrong. And so I called the hospital. I called the Hollywood Memorial Hospital, actually where I was born, not even a year after Adam was taken. And I called down there to their emergency room, and I said, I'm a friend of the family, and we're calling, looking for someone that has, mental health issues, and they had said that they were going to be coming into the emergency room. I was wondering, if you could just let me know, either confirm that they were there at one point. You don't even have to let me know if they're still there, but could you confirm whether this person was there or not? And what's your procedure? I'm sure you have homeless people or different things come in. If people don't have IDs, what's your procedure, right? And she said, oh no, they have to have an official ID, all of this. So I said, could you connect me to, an administrator or your records department or something like that? So they connected me to the records department. I had a pretty lengthy conversation with the woman. She put me on hold for a while, and she said, she looked at the records and she said, yeah, he was here. I even guessed the day. I said, was it about, I think he checked in at this and maybe had, left at this time. And she said, yeah, he was here. And I said, are you sure? Like, what identification would he have had to have for it to say Adam J. Walsh and the birthday on it? And she said, well, I can't help you, specifically, but they have to have an official ID or some sort of thing. So whether or not that's true, that's what happened. I, got off of there. I call my best friend, Kristen Knievel, who's the daughter of or granddaughter of Evel Knievel.
I didn't know. That's an interesting connection.
It is, actually. It is wild how that all happened too. Again, people really have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. So but so I called Kristen up, because she's a little crime fighter too, and tough as nails, and researcher, very good discernment. And I said, what the heck, I listened to this message and look at this photo. And so she wanted to call and find out, who's this messing with my friend and everything. So long story short, I end up talking to this person. They go by Lily. I have recordings and notes that are endless of, him, coming forward with information, relaying information to me. He was living as now we have to understand, when people are coming out from trafficking or these deeper, governmental issues or things like that, or corruption, excuse me, people are looking for these figures to come out and make these announcements. So the reality is that the people that are going to be telling you the truth are not going to be all together. They're not going to be a pretty package for you or anything. I hate to tell you, these people have been traumatized. They've been trafficked. They've been assaulted. They've had to run for their lives, their entire lives. They've had to survive, different things like that. So regardless of who this person is, whether they're Adam or not, they have information and, the timelines and different things that is that definitely warrants a serious looking at and listening to. My parents have refused to do a DNA test with this gentleman. I tried to. The lab said they lost it. I called FedEx and asked who was the signature on it. And then I called the lab and they said that guy doesn't work here. It was this whole, this has been 2.5 years. So he did come out. His name is Lily. He came down actually for my trial, Don, to meet and do the DNA. And I brought him to the last day of my first trial for my 3 children. And he actually sat behind my parents in the courtroom. And they turned around and freaked out, looked like they had seen a ghost. They had the sheriff come in and try to have him removed.
What do you see? I obviously he's a little kid, but do you see any kind of physical similarities that it could possibly be him?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It could vary. I am sitting in the middle of this. Okay. I don't have it. The truth is the truth. It is what it is. I've grown up with my brother deceased for 41 years. Yes. I've always loved him and honored him. He's really the one that deserves this. He's the hero, just like the heroes, in America today are really the children and families that are going through this, that are going to be saved and helped, eventually, if we all can get this together, and do something about it, because it is up to we the people. But no, I definitely think that he deserves to be heard. He is very traumatized and broken. He was put on hormones and lived part of his life as a woman. He still has this. Geez. When we're talking conspiracies, I'm going to be crazy because I'm living in crazy land. I'm living in crazy land. And if we talk about cloning and tunnles and living, kids experimented on and everything, it's here, Don.
You're in a safe place, man. Yeah. Over in the Rockfin chat, Free Thinker 59 says, I can't believe the horrific experiences this woman has been through. She is one strong woman. Absolutely. You certainly are.
Thank you, truly. It's wild. It's not as bad when you're in it. I guess I have to say on my level, I was very fortunate where I was more used on an elite level and not in the, on the streets or in tunnels or anything like that. So I feel blessed and I'm thankful for that. But you're connected. You realize what they are and what you've been involved in around your whole life, and you didn't know that's what it was. It's wild, and the abuse is very wild. It's horrific.
Look at Twisted Pistol's comment on there that. The kidnapping Adam was really his first childhood memory. So he heard all that when he was in kindergarten. So this had a lot of significant impact on people.
It changed a nation on how parents parented, how children grew up, and this whole narrative of stranger danger, when that is the irony is that today we know that's absolutely not the case. It's most likely someone, close, a family member, someone close. And then the irony of the case that starts this is one where we see that there's 3 people living together and, leaving a child and using drugs and, might have been a different situation that is closer to home than a national serial killer.
Yeah. Well, Sam's Bodie's Tree said, did they have DNA tests done on Adam? They found some remains, right?
They found his head. It was kept on ice for 20 some odd years in
I didn't
South
know that.
Florida. My dad was very, adamant about getting, as he says, quote unquote, that boy's remains. He always refers to Adam as that boy. And they did do one test. There was no DNA at the time. I should preface with that. At the time that Adam happened, there was no DNA testing. And they did later do a mitochondrial test using crushed up bone from the skull in comparison with my mother. And the first test came back botched, and I guess the lab tech blood or DNA somehow got in the test. And then the second one had some very shady dealings. Willis Morgan, who again did justiceforadam.com, he is very good at going through breaking down that test. And the errors there. That's not one of my areas of expertise, but there were questions about the test in itself, and then nothing after that. The head was cremated, so that nothing can be done now, as well as the carpet samples that they had from Otis Tools' alleged car that was used. Originally, people were reporting a van, very much like the finders, but then it switched at some point to a white Cadillac, and it being Otis Tool, they had carpet samples with blood, and that was never even, which is what Joe Matthews based his conviction of Otis Tool on, was the blood carpet samples. And to be honest, when you know about it, that was never ruled out of whether that was even human or animal to begin with at all.
Do you see that question from Twisted Pistol about Adam's distinct eyes? Does this guy?
Yeah.
Did you notice? I don't know what's distinct about it.
I will say something. Yeah, he had distinct eyes, and it's also another thing that I hate to. It's been heavy on my heart, but we have to be questioning everything and remove ourselves. I have to remove myself from the situation to do so. But when we were all presented this little boy with a baseball bat, but there's many other pictures of Adam where his eyes, yes, they are definitely distinct eyes, and they're beautiful eyes, but he does have puffy under his eyes. He seems that he could possibly display aspects of either fetal alcohol syndrome or something on the spectrum like that. And in the documentation, it is known and noted that he always had to be, near people. He was very touchy. He needed stimulation. He needed comforting, things like that, which is also interesting. Why I know this isn't part of it, but it's interesting, for example, when the secretary at the school that day comes forward and says that my mother, when she came in, Adam was not with her. But then my mother says, oh, well, I left Adam in the car. So this is a 6-year-old boy that won't even go run across at a baseball game to the stand to get a drink. And yet she's leaving him in a car. And then moments later, because of the vicinity, going to a Sears department store and leaving him in a toy department with other peers and little boys, or, a little older than him, but you get the point. And then she says that, years later, we find in another record, I believe it's 83 or 84, she's interviewed again. And she says that, no, I was holding his hand. He came in with me that day to pay the check. So she even changes her testimony, and especially after being hypnotized. I mean, there's all these things. But back to the eyes with Adam, even the security guard as well in the documents states that the boy that she saw that day, Adam has never even actually been confirmed to be the boy that was there that day. I will say that when the witnesses were shown his picture, no one actually recognized him.
Really?
And the security guard in the records did state that the boy that she had an interaction with looked to be, I'll again horribly paraphrase, but looked to be in a quote unquote bad way, or wasn't taken care of, or there was something off about the little boy. And so there's these details that are very interesting, but to go back to the person coming forward, or Lily, yes, the eyes are there. If there was fetal alcohol or some spectrum, that would be there as well, or just from trauma within the person that I met. Very, very intelligent, very funny, you know what I have to say, and it's not a weird, again, this is not, I want this to be my brother or anything. I've had him hid out for 2.5 years. I haven't come forward except for here and there about it. Because that's his story, and I didn't want anything to detract from that, or vice versa, right, with what I have going on. So, I will say that when I was with him and I was moving him, you have to understand, during my trial, he came down on a bus, and I was moving him from different motel to motel so that people wouldn't know where he was exactly either. This was we had been being threatened, different things of that nature. So it is a very volatile situation. And that also, raises alarm to, is this actually him? If it was just a joke, why would this be to this extent? But when I was with him, I gotta say, it's a wild thing, and maybe it's just life, but I could almost say that he felt more like family than my family's ever felt. So that is an interesting notion that I will be, upfront about. And again, who knows, right? It could have just been somebody that they paid a lot of good money to, or something, to come in and say,
Sure.
but I do know where he is, and that he is, he has been in a nursing home. We got him I actually had to take him to the hospital the night before one of my trials, and I was there with him in the hospital, until 3 a.m. when it should have been my parents, not me, if it's really Adam. But you know what? We're here, and in weird ways, I'm honored. I know that we all have a purpose in life, and, we have to take the good with the bad, and we have to really be questioning how we're really protecting our children, if these efforts that we made and these people that we trusted are really doing what they've said they are.
Absolutely. Well, but I think I alluded to this earlier, but most whistleblowers, and you're essentially a whistleblower, their families abandon them. They don't get the support of their families. Do you have anybody? Is there a cousin, a niece, nephew, something?
I'm sorry.
I'm assuming your brothers and your mother feel the same way as your dad does. But does anybody look at her and say, well, she might have a point, or at least we shouldn't take our kids from her? I mean, is there anybody that's sympathetic to you at all on your side that you're speaking to?
Yeah, and there were even people that within my case and within the system, they were workers and people that came forward and said and testified on our behalf, and they were fired, they were threatened, they were retaliated against, their licenses were come after and taken. But in regards to my family, we have to understand here, my brother, especially the one younger than me, Callahan, he has 2 children of his own now, and he doesn't want this happening to him. I mean, we have to start understanding how these dynamics work. And, my father, at the status that he's at, he doesn't even have to say anything. People are already afraid. They don't want to get involved. Sure. They don't know what John Walsh will do. And really, it's wild, because the more you talk to people, the more you'll find that it's not, again, this narrative of John Walsh as this wonderful person. Most people will say, oh, that guy always gave me the creeps, or I always questioned him. And, that was wild for me to realize. And, once I started speaking out and hearing that, it was a lot more supportive. I have a lot of support across the country. It's been incredible. I couldn't be where I'm at now without the support of the American people, truly. But I do have, I have cousins that have come for, I have a cousin that actually was secretly adopted out by my grandmother, my German grandmother. We talk about generational things. And, what does Adam Walsh have to do with adoption? To be honest, we have Adam Walsh adoption forms and requirements through the National Center. We have, all of this. So when we know about the Finders Cult, now I'll get real crazy, Don, watch out. When we know about the Finders Cult and being a CIA operation by their own declassified documents.
Let's do it for the people that know. The Finders Cult, that's the one where they first found the little kids that looked like they hadn't. They found them in a playground or something, and they found they looked like they not exactly animals, but they didn't look like they were really that civilized. They were dirty, disheveled, and and then they went and found their headquarters or something had human feces and all kinds of crazy. That's what you're talking about? That group, right?
The Finders Cult happened. The arrest happened in 1987. It was 2 gentlemen in a park in Jacksonville, dressed in suits, very agent-like, if you will. They had a van and 6 children who were extremely disheveled, dirty, nonverbal. Only one of them was verbal. And in the van, they had mattresses, and it was filthy in there. And their story was that these were children from the Washington D.C. area, that their parents had given permission for them to be taken to Mexico to a gifted program. That these were gifted children. They were nonverbal, but they were gifted. And then once we look into the Finders cult, their methods, they had a very, they just say that they were an alternative lifestyle, right? When really they were, involved with CIA operations and computer and different things of that nature. So the other thing that was in that van was a computer. And at that time, the computer that was in that van was very advanced for what an average civilian had access to at that time. And what they were doing with that computer, it was the kind that, you could plug into your phone at that time and send messages out and whatnot. So what they were doing on that computer was they were creating a quote unquote network of families and children. They were kidnapping the children and they were swapping them, changing names and birthdays. They were swapping them and having the children raised by other members within the cult. So the ideal behind that, and what was revealed through the arrest and the 6 children, was the cult finders' mothers. The mothers of these children were very distant. They said, yes, we approved of this. I mean, they were in a cult. We know how that happens. They go along with it. They're brainwashed, whatever it is, or they're part of it. And what we find their methods were exactly weaning the children from the mothers. And because it was towards the Hillary Clinton, Margaret Sanger, Dr. Kinsey kind of theme of the it takes a village, right? It takes a village. So it was this communal type lifestyle, they were saying. But when I'll skip forward, if you will, that when we look at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we find there a network of children and different databases and the information on parent, different things like that. So the question there is the National Center essentially a larger, in your face, now developed government version of what the Finders cult and these different people with these ideologies or wants, is it stemming from that? Is it a larger version of that now that we see how it's being used with Amber Alert, with international adoption, all these things that they now have what seems to be a monopoly on the kid protection business or the child business. They also have the world's largest child porn database, which you have to ask with no oversight and everything, who has access to that when we see such a pay-to-play donor base and partnership and things. So it's very
I'm just astounded at how many people are touched by this. If you look at the comment on the screen, Dawn Lambert, who is contributes to this chat as a regular viewer, says, my grandmother took us 4 kids to neighbors and factories to play with toys.
Yeah.
While a group of men masturbated while we played. I just always astounded this that there's that many messed up people that are doing this, especially, and this kind of in the open there. And your grandmother's getting involved. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that, Dawn. Bless your heart.
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry too, Dawn. But you know what I want to say is thank you for your testimony and thank you for your courage in putting this comment up, because this is what we need more of. We need more people that have experienced this coming forward, and we need more people that are in the system doing this currently to come forward. And it's time. So what we're realizing is that things like the sex offender registry, which was done with the Adam Walsh Act on Adam's anniversary, signed by Bush in the Rose Garden. It was put out that it's this now new registry to the main purpose, the sole purpose is to identify every pedophile, toucher of your kids and everything. But no one even over all these years has looked at it. It's called the sex offender registry. Yeah. Do we even know the actual percent of pedophiles that are on the sex offender registry?
They include
is that actually protecting children? Is that actually protecting children?
And they classify people that were arrested for public urination as sex offenders. They lump everything in together, so you don't know if somebody raped a 5-year-old or peed against a tree.
Exactly. I actually was just asked and did a fundraiser event for Women Against Registry, which is a wonderful effort that is asking to abolish the sex offender registry. It's not protecting our children. It's making people second-class citizens and pariahs of society.
Yes, it is.
It's
Yes.
actually inhibiting from people with pedophilic disorder from seeking help, and most of all, it's keeping people with these issues of in the family situations, which we know are the majority. Okay.
Yes,
We know the
exactly.
majority are in the family. So when you have a sex offender registry and your daughter comes to you and says, Uncle Tommy touched me, what does that do to your world? What do you then have to reconcile with? Oh my
Yes.
gosh, Uncle Tommy's now going to be on the sex offender registry if I say something. Our
Uh,
whole family is going to be stigmatized if
well,
we say
people don't
something.
want to face it. I mean, it's
His
easier just to say,
children. What about Uncle Tommy's
you
children?
you
Yeah.
must have misinterpreted it. I mean, I've had it in my extended family too. The same kind of thing. And people
Yeah.
don't want to. It's too. They don't want to open that can of worms. Because it's
Well, and you know what the issue is that it is real, and we want to be all. That's the thing too, is the narrative put out. Pedophiles, we can't even entertain them in society. They're degenerates. They don't. No, I'm not saying anything's okay about it whatsoever. But do we let them out in society? Yes, we do. They serve their time. They do whatever. They go out into society. Now, 95%, 93 or 95% of child sex offenders are first-time offenders. Okay. So, and the majority, I think it's 93. The other statistic is that it's from the family. So we're we're not having, these pedophiles are going out, or sex offenders, whatever your argument is, it still doesn't add up because they're going back out in society. And now we've put such a stigma on them that they will not go seek help for their pedophilic disorder or their addiction to pornography or whatever it is that's leading them to that. And so then where does that leave us there?
Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
that's
Well,
not
if
a
you see,
bubble.
Rhonda Tate, who is been a supporter of mine for a very long time, and I never do this. And again, thanks for your courage for coming. Said she used to hide from the neighbor man when she was 13. You don't
Mhm,
specify.
mhm.
I'm assuming he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. That your
Yeah,
dad would find out. So I'm sorry to hear that, Rhonda. It's amazing how many young girls, especially, went through this.
oh
God, it's a
yeah,
wonder you talk to any of us, I guess, when you grow up, 'cause
yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
there's a lot of bad ones out there.
And it's not even necessarily sexual abuse. I mean, I grew up in a closet, and that's a very congruent thing for a lot of abused children is the closet. And I was running from my mother, who's barking her teeth at me and threatening me growing up.
No, no, wait, wait. So you,
It's
so you were. I've heard about that. So they punished you by putting you in a closet.
no, Don. I would run to the closet because it had a
Oh,
dresser
you
in
would
it that
run.
I
You
could.
would run for protection.
Hmm.
Okay, okay,
Yes.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and then that's where I could find my peace, and my mother would even say, ironically, that's when I was young, I would always be in the closet playing too. It's a very congruent and odd, something you wouldn't really think about unless you looked at this kind of
No,
stuff
sure,
overall.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, sure. That's
But yeah, we all, even the sister of, my daughter's father, who she's with now, in his own family, I was best friends with his younger sister growing up. And she, was molested by a family member in a pool when she was young. She went to her parents, and her parents told her, no, that didn't happen, and don't say anything and forget about it.
yeah,
So.
yeah. That seems to be what people were told for a long time. I don't know. I don't understand it, but obviously need to address the problem because especially when it's somebody. And you're right. People talk about stranger danger, and it is. I don't know what the percentage is, but the vast majority of time, it's someone they know. It's a relative, and
It leaves roughly 7% that would actually be a stranger, Don.
but they push the serial
Seven
killer
seven
motive,
percent. Yeah,
and
yes.
and there was I don't know, but before I forget, Chris had asked something about. Let me find that question about Stephen Stainer. I think it was. Is it Stephen Stainer?
I bet he did, Rhonda. She said he
Yeah,
got in trouble years later. It always comes out, honey,
yeah,
and I'm glad that he did. I'm sorry that they
yes.
had to experience that as well.
I'm sorry too. Do you see that Chris is talking about Stephen Stainer case in the TV movie? I know my name is. That was the one where he survived and he just
I
was a
don't
good.
know that. I've actually heard of it, but I don't know that one, I have to say.
Well,
Wow. This is good. This is
it was
awesome.
kind of a feel good story. Yeah, Chris Graves, he's on top. He's I'm so lucky to have him because he just I know a lot about this stuff, but Chris is the go to guy, and he's
Yeah.
a wonderful
Yeah.
researcher. But yeah, I think Stephen Stainer was the one where he was abducted, and then I think he lived with a man as I'm pretty sure as a sex slave. I mean, why else would they abduct him? And then he came back later as an adult, and so it was kind of a happy story, but I guess it's better than it was killed. So, but it was a very unusual case, so they made a movie about that.
I'm not familiar with that one, but I do have to say something to that kind of actually ties everything together from tonight, from Las Vegas to child trafficking to John Walsh to the National Center, which is a case that has come out. We've actually had people coming forward that they have been exploited, or their children have been exploited by the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. And one of them can also be found on Twitter. The account is called Teachers Against Trafficking. Again, that's Teachers Against Trafficking. And it is the case of a young man. He's now 17 or 16, excuse me, Yeshua, and his father, Othello. And that is also the same ring with the Las Vegas Metro Police. The father, Othello, had custody of Yeshua from birth because his mother, she was on drugs, didn't have her life together because she herself had been trafficked since the age of 3 by her own mother. Okay, so he had sole custody of this beautiful little boy, Yeshua, since he was young. And he actually was working for the DOJ. He had created a program for youth in the community. The father, that is, Othello, had created this program where they were teaching children how to do media and music and all this new stuff without, signing contracts and getting in the industry and, doing all of this. And so it had huge results in the community. The crime rates were going down. Everything was really going amazing. So he put in a bid for the, the county contract, if you will, or the state contract, I believe it was actually, for the following year. And I don't know if he knew or not at the time, but the fact of the matter was that the other, people putting bids in were the Las Vegas Metro Police, as well as the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. Now, he actually won the bid. And he got the funding, which took all that funding away from them and did not make them happy. And what happened is one day he was at Walmart with his mother, and they're walking out and they're looking, because they're community members, they're good people. They're looking at the missing wall at Walmart from the National Center with all the faces on it. And there they see Yeshua's face and his face on an Amber Alert, stating that he had kidnapped his son, that he was a sexual predator, that Yeshua was in trouble, or in danger, excuse me. And they have 15 U.S. Marshals. This is a John Walsh production. This is what he does. And we also had one of his best friends when I was growing up, his daughter come forward and say, yeah, my mom took me one time when my dad didn't want me to our relatives, and he made one phone call to your dad, and the next morning there were black SUVs surrounding the house, arresting my mother, taking me back to my father, and it was because he called your dad. But so here we have, back to Yeshua and Othello, we have 15 or so U.S. Marshals coming in at gunpoint into the home. The grandmother is holding Yeshua, and they are arresting Othello, charging him, for child kidnapping and all of this. And then that's what got them to be able to take Yeshua, and they placed him in the custody of his maternal grandmother, the one that had been trafficking his mother since the age of 3, now gave her the 7-year-old child. And that's what we're finding CPS is doing. They are handing children to the abusers and to literal pedophiles, which is actually an extension of a Nazi project where they were giving boys to pedophiles back then.
Well, you're bringing out the anecdotes here. I mean, as Free Thinker 59 over here says, he remembers being put on some guy's lap when he was a toddler, and the guy getting an erection. I'm just amazed this happened to so many people. I mean, it's the daddy lap.
Yeah, the daddy lap is a big one.
Thank you, Rhonda says. Stephen, the story we were talking about, he ended up saying, that's what I remember now. He ended up saving, he saw the new kid being groomed, and he somehow got away and saved that kid's life. So
Oh,
that was
very cool.
so
I'll
that's
definitely
why.
have to look into that. Yeah.
And Admiral Adams is saying when he was in the U.S. Air Force, one of the supervisors assaulted his stepdaughter and went to
Yeah.
jail for it. The thing is, he never suspected. I mean, this guy was, I guess, an upstanding guy. That's the thing. A lot of times, I guess you would never suspect them. They seem very respectable. The last person you would suspect, right?
No, I think, and in a weird way, when you have to be that person out in public and so, stewardly and all of that, I mean, that would be, through psychology would be an unfortunate or disgusting, but a real manifestation from that where you have to take that power out or you have to be that polar opposite, if you are on that level of troubled and psychopathy, if you will. So yeah, it's very real. We're seeing a lot of it. People don't realize a lot of it is through the military. Children are moved through the bases and their names are changed and they're adopted to military families. And that even goes into the women that are being raped in the military now and coming out and everyone's ignoring them and they're shamed within the military.
Well,
and
about the Presidio and Colonel Michael Aquino,
exactly.
Right? I mean, so
Yep.
I mean, that's an open Satanist that was a colonel and was accused of very explicit testimony, and he always got away with it. It's amazing.
Always. Same with Larry King in North Fox Island. He's walking around now and he's hiding in churches, so it's the same thing. We've got, and John Walsh is walking around right now with a 17-year-old and his father saying, John Walsh, Obama, Kamala Harris, and others have trafficked me from the age of 7 to 16.
Really? Tell us about this. I haven't heard this. Who is this 17 years old?
This is what I was talking about is he's 16 or 17 now, excuse me. But the Teachers Against Trafficking account, Yeshua and Othello, they have now come out. Yeah, they have now come out and, they have filed federally like I did. They're all of our cases are dismissed because the courts are corrupt, because all of these are on retainers. So they know to dismiss these cases. Mine can actually be reopened. I have a federal RICO out on my father and everyone in the county that has done this to my children and I. But they have filed, they are out and talking about and have all of the proofs and needing help and support to get their story out about, John Walsh and these others involved in trafficking him from age 7 to 15. He was made to take hormone pills so that he would grow breasts for snuff films. He was made to drink 32 ounces of men's semen and very horrific. I mean, these are not easy things to deal with. And these are our children being put through this is why it's, why I feel such a responsibility too. I mean, if we can't handle it, what about these children that are going through it as we're speaking? So they've been very courageous. They're amazing. The two of them, I've connected with them when Othello was trying to get Yeshua from the grandmother. Yeshua was going online and making cries for help to come save him. And I had reached out to him and spoken to him. Othello ended up getting him out and now they're speaking out about it. And, they're very straightforward about it, much more than I can be. And, calling for the arrest of my father, who should be doing life without possibility of parole, according to the allegations that they're providing.
Well, what is the situation with your? When is the last time have you had any contact with your children? Especially the oldest one, I think you said was 17 or something. Are any of them? Do they want to see you or?
Oh yeah, my children beg to come home every second. They're waiting for everyone to get it together and save them. Everyone involved and everybody. But no, my parents are keeping them from me. They are essentially trying to erase me with mansions and cake and cookies and parties and everything that they gave me when I was growing up, so that I wouldn't realize the abuse. So none of us would. And that's what they're doing to my children. They're literally doing the playbook that they did with us. And that's also more revealing of what, we went through growing up. And it's horrific, Don. My children are yearning to come home and my family needs to be restored. My baby is now ripped from her mother at 5 days old, which actually is attempted murder on a baby and a mother. And now she's been sold by John Walsh. So I don't know what more it's going to take for the country to wake up to this, Don. It's really a depraved level.
And we know CPS is right in the middle of this. I'm sure you've probably heard about the case of Beverly Schaefer. and her
Yeah.
husband, and were murdered, almost certainly murdered in Georgia. She was the most outspoken critic of
Nancy, yeah,
CPS.
Nancy
Nancy Schaefer,
Schaefer
yes. And
is probably my biggest inspiration in life, along with a mentor, and mentor as well, obviously, as well as Ted Gunderson. And Ted, if
yes,
you
yes,
look online, is very upfront years ago, and I believe it
yes.
was 96.
Yeah,
He
he was
was
one of the
coming out saying the National Center for
Yeah,
Missing Exploited Children is the child trafficking front. And
yes,
Kathy O'Brien has come out and been
yeah,
very clear about the fact that her owner and handler, Senator Byrd,
yeah.
which National Center was founded by Congress. It's funded by Congress. It's a nonprofit of the District of Columbia. It's located in Alexandria, which was taken out of the territory. And what was it, 70 something or 45? I can't remember when Alexandria was taken out of that 10-mile district area. And which also you wonder why Alexandria, but then we see ties with Israel and data sharing, especially out of there. The National Center headquarters was originally a post office in the bottom of it, in the first floor, which is significant for this kind of stuff. So, anyways, there's I'm getting off topic, but we
No,
have to be.
you're really all this stuff. That's why it's amazing that you're just not a one trick pony. You're just not a bitter, understandably bitter mother that's trying to get her kids back. You've done your research. You know all these things. You're politically awake, and that's what makes you so fascinating.
Thank you. I would always get in trouble with my father because I wouldn't be a lawyer, and I'd get in trouble with my mother because I wouldn't get into politics. So here we are. I've been representing myself pro se. I've been in the federal courts filing and pregnant, and we're covering all the politics and lawyer we possibly can. So, and that goes, why I was talking about Yeshua and Othello, not only because this is a very significant case that people need to be talking about and demanding answers about, but, it does, again, just another example of how this is happening, especially with Amber Alert. So Amber Alert is being used by CPS, especially when we're finding that when children are running from CPS, which if it's so amazing and everything, then why are children running away? Then, or they are going to their parents and they're saying, I'm going to run away or you need to come get me. And so the parent, of course, that's your child. You go and get your child. You don't care whether you're going to get in trouble or not. If your child's saying, I'm in this foster home or I'm here, and then here's CPS, you're doing everything. You're losing your home. You're losing your job. You're going broke to go through these courts and get bombarded. Then just to beg for your child back, which is probably never going to come home. You're at the end of your rope, you're at the end of the line. So you're going to go pick up your child and then they're going to put out an Amber Alert on you. If you look at the percentage of Amber Alerts that say it is parental abduction, they created like stranger danger serial killer. It's parental abduction is the term now, and it's being used horribly against people. And Amber Alert has really become this, keep your product. If your product escapes, now we have a national alert system to find the product and reel it back in. Same with what we found with the Clinton Foundation as well, the human trafficking hotline.
Absolutely. Admiral Adams says I should try to get you on the Jeff Rense show. I don't know if you heard of Jeff Rense. He's got a big show, and I'm on there every week. He probably would love to talk with you. I'll ask him about that. But
thank you guys.
Yeah, no, because you're a fascinating guest because you can talk about all these things. About I'd throw Michael Aquino's name, the Finders. About
how about Dutroux?
I'm sorry, who?
Dutroux. We haven't even covered the Dutroux affair that National Center was involved in. And
talk about that. Go for it. I don't know if I know that one.
Well, I think more so people can look into that, but more so that would lead to Backpage is what a lot of people would know about, the Backpage scandal and online with the whole efforts of, online sex abuse, the online trafficking. Ernie Allen of the National Center was very interesting because they were working with Backpage and everything. And then when the Backpage scandal came out that they were actually involved in trafficking, then all of a sudden Ernie Allen is, testifying and stuff, so it was like this cover, or now we're not associated with Backpage, now that this is trafficking, which then would also lead into what we're seeing. Okay. So the National Center was 83, 84. It was established by Reagan in 83, right? Or 84. I can't remember. Sorry.
Yeah.
And, And so so from that was really the first time that kind of a structure was set up, right? That was Ernie's intentions. There was to set up legislation and lobbying and everything, which we now see has been nefariously used, as well as how to gain funding for tons of money and pay out yourself high salaries and all this kind of thing. So when we see the National Center set up this prototype, and then we see all of the subsequent, missing children's cases that have been chosen by the media that then have a foundation or a center or an organization come out of their cause or their case, and then what that is surround the issues it's surrounding, and then what legislation they can pass through that, right, and what funding they can bring in.
They do pick and choose these cases. And Natalie Holloway, I've investigated a lot, and I think Tim Ballard, wasn't he involved? Or maybe I'm thinking of Texas EquiSearch that was involved there. But Natalie Holloway's one that got a lot of publicity, but there were lots of kids.
And Van Jorn just came out finally admitting that he did it.
Well,
that was literally a month ago.
I'll have to talk to you about that, because actually I have inside information for that. In fact, I have a manuscript that one day I'll publish it maybe, but and I have people that like Chris Graves early on. These people have great connections, and they know Jorn van der Sloot. They've been talking to him. I don't think Jorn van der Sloot killed anybody. I think he's been a scapegoat, but he is
very possible.
He's a habitual,
especially with his father. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's a habitual liar. He just keeps. I don't know what his problem is, but we studied it. But I don't want to get off track.
Okay, well, we'll definitely have to talk about that, and maybe we'll hash it out one day on here. But please, I would love to talk about that. That's very interesting, because what you're saying is very plausible as well. And that's something, I'll add that little connotation on the side. Jeffrey Dahmer and his father, Lionel, Lionel comes out as this man, and he said, I think my son did it, and, I'm this good citizen and everything, when we actually find out the weird things that, he did with Jeffrey, and teaching him to cut open small animals and initiate those initial things and
it ties into the Podestas we mentioned with Tony Podesta. John Podesta's brother has that artwork in his very bizarre sculpture in his home that is twisted into what they claim is a position of one of Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite positions or something for his victims.
And that's the art world. That's the art world that people don't understand and look at. Yeah. And that would be where the National Center, Hunter Biden's artwork and all of this. I did the same thing, not knowing. I did a fundraiser for the National Center, and Hank Asher bought my artwork and everything. And I started thinking, wait a second, this is being recycled back into.
When you think these are good people, you don't think that over in Rockfin, they love you. They're saying, this guest is blowing my mind. She's so brave, and they also throw me a crumb too. And Don is such a
good. Thank
you very much.
I want to say something to the art and topic before we get off. This is a little excerpt, but it's also with the National Center and this issue of child trafficking. So what we have to look at here is somebody else. So I brought up Ernie Allen. I've brought up Hank Asher. These are kind of those names that people want to know, essentially, when they're saying like the Black Book and, it's Epstein's list and all this kind of stuff. Right. The people that you don't know their names. So Ernie Allen, Hank Asher, but also Jeffrey Coons. So Jeffrey Coons is a pop artist. He is known as the highest paid living pop artist because he sold through Sotheby's auction house for $91.1 million to Steve Mnuchin's father. He sold a huge chrome rabbit. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. A chrome rabbit. And his artwork is very known for the hypnotic nature. And, we could go into that as a whole show, I with my art degrees and everything. But what I'm getting at here is that he also, his prior work before this modern pop stuff that he's been doing was figures, life-size figures of children, figurines of children, of him and his ex-wife, who was actually an Eastern European porn star. And this was back in the day. And he was known for this very evocative, artwork, and they're naked and all this. So she comes out divorcing him, saying that he wanted to do disgusting things in the bedroom and expected her to do all this stuff, which as a porn star, I can't imagine, what that is. And so with all due respect, and then she also stated that she walked in, several times with him naked with their son
as a baby, and that he was, doing very inappropriate things and having the baby do things to him. So she actually ended up taking their son and fleeing back to Europe with her family. And he made himself the victim, said that she had kidnapped him, and went after her through The Hague. And that's where his case and the McCann case really, and Meghan's Law, have really been the hubs to set up an international level.
Madeline McCann. We could talk about that case too.
Yeah,
That's another one. But I want to make sure we get this all and give you a chance to. Do you think your dad's Twisted Pistol says? Do you think he's possibly an intelligence agent?
Do I? Yeah. Yes, I do. Absolutely believe that. And we know that they're all placed in media. I believe it. Yes, I do. I would like to give people this line real quick, though, of the art world and Jeffrey Coons. So if you look at Jeffrey Coons, I know we're getting longer here, but I just want to give people the names then if we don't go into it. But look at Jeffrey Coons. He also started the foundation, the Coons Foundation, which then helped to develop the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. He got involved there. Then he went on to be behind forming the International Center for Missing Exploited Children with Ernie Allen, Richard Branson of NXIVM Sex Cult and Necker Island, as well as his mother, Eve Branson, as well as the World Economic Forum, which brings in the fact that the National Center is a government agency operating as a nonprofit. They are a globalist organization that is a think tank with the World Economic Forum behind them and others, as well as the big corporations like Amazon, Meta, and so on and so forth. So what that did was with the International Center, that was also founded with Tony Blair's wife, as well as Hillary Rodham Clinton. So then once Jeff Koons had sold his art for $91.1 million, it put him on that status, that level of status where he could be appointed and work within the Arts and Embassies program. So then we see there's a great Vanity Fair article written by Hillary Clinton herself talking about, with Marina Abramovich and Jeff Koons and others pictured in it, talking about the Arts and Embassies program.
Cooking. Yeah.
And so when we look at the Arts and Embassies program and shipping, there's been a lot of big hype and controversy and dramatization of this, but we know that embassies are trafficking children through paperwork and adoptions and different things. We know that also the embassies, when art and live art is shipped, it is not as inspected when it's through the embassies, and also because they say, oh, it's fragile or we don't want to damage it or any of that. So when you have people like Jeffrey Koons who are working through the Arts and Embassies program with Abramovich and Hillary Clinton, when his artwork is known to be life-size figurines of children and humans, and then I did the exposure from Marco Polo from the Hunter Biden laptop, I actually found an email from Harvey Weinstein to Hunter Biden talking about campaign basically laundering, where he and Jeff Koons had decided that Jeff was going to make 40 some odd prints of one of his crap pieces of art, and they were going to sell them for $50,000 a piece. They were going to have one of their quote unquote, Podesta-like private dinners, and all of the proceeds were going to be donated to Hillary's campaign. And in that was going to also be hosting was Larry Gagosian, their buddy. So if we look at the Gagosian gallery, we see also figurines of children by some of the artists, and not only figurines of children, but also of hybrid children. And in theory, if we get into the conspiracy world, if you are selling, figurines of, children or humans, and you're an international artist and it's collectibles in this high level, who would question, whether that's actually people or children in those,
exactly right.
in that transport.
I want to make sure you get. Chris has asked a couple times, and I'm interested too. When is your podcast already started? Tell us about your podcast.
Yes, tomorrow night will be the 4th episode. It is on Rumble. I believe now we're on Spotify. As of today or yesterday, we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, all those guys. But we are on Rumble and Foxhole. The channel is called Insight, INSITE, not GHT, but TE. Insight, and it's called Reexamined with Meghan Walsh. We do it every Saturday night now at 11 p.m. But of course, you can always watch we love the late, we love the live, and everyone does join us actually, but there's always the recording after if you're not that late of a person.
Yeah, these shows get watched a lot. Well, that's great. I'm glad you're doing that. I would. When I have a couple minutes left, anything else that you forgot you wanted to mention, and I, obviously well appreciate it, and I want you to give out all your links and anything you want to promote. But anything that we missed, because we covered a lot of stuff here.
Woo, we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having me on, and these kind of conversations are actually really refreshing for me. It's very nice to be amongst people that do, know this kind of stuff as well. Just like you say to me, Don, it right back at you, bud. And I can't thank you enough for having me. But I really do wish that, my wish out of this is for people to really be asking the question, what is American child trafficking, and realizing that it is our child protective services and our family courts, and really looking into, we all have different things that resonate with us or different capabilities, but looking into ways that you can get involved in your community. I did, we'll get to the announcements or the links now, I guess, because I did actually just get approved by the Secretary of State for my new nonprofit, Protect American Families. So we're very happy about that. I've also just registered as a lobbyist. And so we're working on some legislation, and we'll be moving, my campaign I call Better Ways because there's simply better ways to all of this stuff. And so we are really looking at, focusing on the families and not just the children. These are huge children's rights violations as well. Every child has rights, and especially to their biological family. And the system that we're doing now is completely inverted, where we're stealing children and handing them to strangers and have incentives and quotas on all of it, when really we should be focusing on what the struggles are that are creating the neglect or abuse. And if there is real situations like that, then we have a criminal justice system for that. But this gray area where children are being taken, and it's only getting worse and worse, especially with my dad, he's setting case precedent behind closed doors, and people don't realize the importance of my case and coming out and demanding that it be investigated and stopped, because this now sets precedent to take children for essentially any subjective reason. The quote in the case files is any potential future adverse event deemed.
Minority Report. You may be doing something.
Oh my God, it is Minority. I say it every single day, Don. And he also lost his son in the movie too. But we're here. So.
Oh man, I can't tell. I'm sorry. The time we're out. I mean, because this, I could talk to you.
No. Let me tell people where they can find me. Okay,
yes,
so you can find me on Saturday nights on Rumble or any of those on the Insight with Reexamined, and that is Adam Walsh's case files we're going over. I'll be bringing in other people that have experts or information on that in the near future, but we're getting established and building, setting the foundation. So people can find me there. Also, Tuesday nights at 8:00 on Twitter Spaces or X Spaces. Yes. I can't keep up. But myself and the Hollywood reporter, Mike Pack, he actually used to be a producer for the Jenny Jones show and Big Brother and all this, and he deflected from Hollywood and came out years ago. So he's one of my best buds, and we do a space on X on Tuesday nights. I'm on other podcasts like yours. People can find me, but my main place is X. So everyone, please go to Meghan Walsh _. Of course, people like myself and those that are really in the trenches, I'm not the only one. There are many women and children actually being hunted in our country and being destroyed. And resources is what they go after. They go after work. They make it so you can't work. They make it so that, when you try to do other things, you're defamed and you meet an end. So I will say that the people of this country have kept me going so far. And we do have legal stuff as well as, the effort for Protect American Families and things. So prayers are very invaluable. We thank everyone for their prayers and thoughts. Sharing the information is very essential, and we need to spread awareness and get this out. And also, if you feel move to donate whatsoever, any little bit or your cup of coffee or any of that, I do actually have a Cash App, which is M Walsh Consulting, or I do have PayPal, which is found at Family Farm and Faith at gmail.com. That's Family Farm and is spelled out A-N-D, Faith, Family Farm and Faith at gmail.com.
Well, yeah, everybody contribute to her. That's you're doing great work, Megan. Bless your heart. Like I said, you're doing. I hope you get your kids back real soon, and I hope you get some kind of justice. I know that's a lot of people are wanting justice that don't get it, but you've been through some hard times. You have a wonderful attitude. You're doing great work, and I'm just honored that you come on my show, and I really appreciate it. And I hope we'll have to have you back somehow to talk again soon. Okay.
Absolutely, Don. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everyone that watched tonight and the support. I got to bug you about your guy, Chris.
Oh yeah. Well, he has a podcast too, and I know he'd love to have you come on. So I'll have to hook you up with him.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, text me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody in both chat rooms, especially for sharing your own very sad stories. And it's sad that it's going out. Child sex trafficking and scandals are all too real. And thank you very much, Meghan Walsh, for reminding us of that. Good luck to you. Thanks so much for everyone for listening to I Protest. We'll talk to you next week.